In this video, I'm going to talk to you about my experiences with the Chord Electronics ULTIMA Integrated Amplifier, a HiFi amplifier with a very unique aesthetic. You can kind of see it there behind me, and also with a unique sound in ways too. So should the ULTIMA be your next HiFi amplifier? Maybe. Chord Electronics are a long-established UK hi-fi manufacturer that I'm pretty sure make all their own products in-house at their factory in Kent. And I'm hoping to get down to the factory at some point this year to make a video with them, so make sure you look out for that one. But they're also an interesting manufacturer that make very tiny but very technical hi-fi products that hit great price points, like the Mojo and Mojo 2 headphone amplifier and DACs that are very famous. And they make a number of products that I would class as very small but still highly technical. But at the other end of things, they also manufacture what most people would call giant amplifiers and also large stacks of digital products. And I often make the joke, I wonder how many ways there are left for Chord to sculpt aluminium, because you cannot question the ambition of a lot of their product designs, and the build quality is unquestionably high, but also the amount of aluminium that's being used, especially in something like this ULTIMA amplifier. There's a lot of aluminium being used here, and there must be a huge amount of machine time to sculpt those lovely shapes. I mean, even the solid aluminium legs, they have like a curved top to them. So all of that is, obviously machine time. There's a huge amount that's gone in here. So of course, all of that added up, you can start to see why this amplifier is going to cost some money before you even power it on. And sticking to the form factor for now, the ULTIMA is a pretty small integrated amplifier really, packaged into a larger form factor with the integrated stand and overall design. It's also extremely simple to use, but not obvious at all. The central sphere is the power on and off button. The left, lovely sculpted knob controls the volume, and the smoothness with which this operates is quality or inspiring. Then to select between our different inputs, you press the volume in, and the colouring changes to indicate what input is selected. And I think this is really pretty cool, and it's definitely something that feels really quite special as part of the overall design. However, you do have to press those buttons really quite firm, and it is quite a clunky thing in operation. Now, I'm sure it's robust and the build quality is just as robust as those solid aluminium legs. But if you're a little bit squeamish about doing that, or if you're just lazy, of course you can change the inputs with the really nice, actually really lovely aluminium remote control, which I always think it's pretty special when you can use a remote control and adjust, the volume and see that all moving. It's really quite a cool experience. So yeah, kudos to Chord for this quality remote control. The knob on the right is our balance control. And again, that has lovely sculpting and feels the same awe-inspiring quality to turn. There is a lovely resistance to how both of the controls operate. But I do have the same gripe here that I've had before, that there is no obvious center or obvious perfect in the middle stop to it. So I do think I would prefer it to be, some kind of clunk or some kind of indicator for exactly perfect in the middle. But you can also adjust the balance from the remote control. So that means none of this really matters, because you can just sit in the seat and just adjust the balance till it's absolutely perfect for you for listening, which is the only thing that matters and the only thing that's important anyway. On the rear is just about enough connections depending on how your system is built. At the moment, I am using the balanced input for the Chord Electronics Hugo TT2 DAC and a single-ended input from the Modrite PH9 phono stage. So I was covered here with the inputs available, but there is only one balanced input, and I would have preferred two. There is a second balanced input, but that's only used for an AV bypass. And it's definitely a shame that that second or AV XLR balanced input can't also be used for a second balanced input to the amplifier with just then the option to turn AV bypass on or off. That really is a shame. And also I feel like using one of the single-ended Inputs for AV bypass would have suited a lot of AV receiver owners better. However, I'm sure Chord have chosen to use XLR balanced input for AV bypass for a specific reason. There is a balanced output, so you could use the Ultima just as a preamplifier in the future if you wanted to change to a different power amplifier. I like that. But more interesting to some will be that you can use the balanced output to connect to another amplifier to create a biamped situation. And I can see some people really liking the idea of that with certain speakers. One of Chord's unique design touches that I've always liked is being able to see inside their products just a little bit with the help of LED illumination. On other Chord similar products that I have reviewed, you can adjust the brightness of the LEDs with a hidden button behind the front faceplate. And I did try to find it, but it's not there with the Ultima. You have to do it the old-fashioned way with a remote control. The LEDs on Chord products have always looked a little more interesting when the lights are dimmed, as often the glow accentuates the casework curves. And this is harder to see and get on camera with a black finish unit. With a silver finish unit, it definitely stands out more. And I think overall, I prefer the silver, but I am having a bit of a silver hi-fi fetish at the moment. For the main specification of the Ultima, it can deliver 125 watts of power per channel into 8 ohms. But interestingly, there's not a 4 ohm power rating on the website or that I could find. So that is definitely unusual to not see. But with a lot of Chord products, there's a hell of a lot that is different here, a hell of a lot that is proprietary, such as a unique amplifier architecture, such as the use of custom switch mode power supplies, proprietary switch mode power supplies, proprietary MOSFETs, and more. So this is a very unique amplifier from the inside as well as from the outside, which I think is really great and very important given the price, which is just shy of £8,500. So this is a high-end, very premium hi-fi amplifier that of course is just an integrated amplifier. That's all it's doing. It's not offering anything else, no other bells and whistles like some other products do. And you might not also see that as a lot of power on paper either, depending on how you look at it. And some might question the value proposition here when you have famous amplifiers like the NAD M23 that I also have here, that's offering double the power on paper for a third of the cost. But do remember, the M23 is just a power amplifier, so you would need a preamplifier to go with it as well, so that would add additional cost, of course. But I like to look at the bigger picture, literally, because at the other end of the market, there are integrated amplifiers like the Griffin Diablo 300 that cost double that of the Chord. So when you look at the broader picture, how does the Ultima stack up? Well, I think the Ultima offers 2.5, bear with me, real standout sonic strengths regardless of price. And I've looked at a lot of, high-end expensive integrated amplifiers over the last 7 years. So it offers 2.5 really standout sonic strengths that I don't think are what you are expecting them to be. And the first one is the fluidity of the music. How the music or the rhythm of the music flows along with a really rock solid tempo. So you feel like this amplifier is in complete control of the music and it delivers the vibe of the music really on point. And that could be some choral music in a church or some Stormzy grime. And I have listened to both. And of course, both of these styles of music have really different contrasting tempos and vibes about them, where Stormzy is all about the bass and the bass bounce and how that sets the mood of the track, and choral is all about the lead and maybe backing vocals with the echoey decays that make the music sound atmospheric. But it doesn't matter with the Ultima. The timing of each piece of music is so on point from the first to the last note, from the bass right up to the treble. And you could just say, well, that's just an organised sound, but it's not. There's more to it than that. Using the example of choral music, and a church, and the singer and then the decays. The way the Ultima allows you to hear the detail, the real subtle nuances, the layers and the detail in the decays of that choral music is really stand out and really something, and it just makes that whole piece of music or the experience of listening to it just that bit more special. And it does it without sounding forced or etched or too analytical. It is a little bit analytical, of course, how could it not be? But not too analytical to become distracting. So that is all super impressive. There are a couple of buts that come along with this, or maybe pros and cons. Because the Ultima's timing is so good and it's so on point, I found it to maybe sound a little reserved at times, because it just wants to keep the music timing so good that it maybe lacks a little bit of like a let loose or rock out kind of nature to it. But this is a tiny niggle, but something that I noticed. Another thing that I noticed with this type of sound presentation is that it puts me in quite an active listen type of frame of mind. And I'm generally in an active listen frame of mind anyway, because this is a review. So I'm switched on. I'm really trying to listen to the sound as much as the music. But this type of sound presentation, it just puts me in that listen frame of mind, the active listen, rather than just, kick back. The second standout strength of the Ultima is the vocals quality. The vocals have a palpable authenticity or realism about them that's super standout. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it sounds like a person or a voice is singing direct into a microphone. And now I record my voice all the time. I know what that sounds like, more than just a piece of music that's played back on a hi-fi system. And you could say that's just vocal resolution, and yes it is, of course, but I'm not just talking about the lead vocalist, that center image that we get with all hi-fi. I'm talking about any vocalist. Could be over the left, could be over the right, could be at the back of the soundstage, at the front, doesn't really matter. It's all presented really clear with that same crystal clear, high resolution definition sound to them, which is great. But more importantly, it was also delivered with excellent or authentic or very realistic tone or timbre. So there's a real sense of palpable sense of realism to the way the vocals come through. And that's a hard thing. I never use that phrase. It's just something that stood out to me about this amplifier. The vocals sound more like this, microphone and mouth, rather than, not that. It's different. It's hard to describe. And this is definitely not delivered in a tube amp, very romantic, overly warm way, because that can sound quite realistic as well. The Ultima sounds a bit more authentic realistic rather than tube stylized authentic. And of course, there's a big difference there. And I suppose the obvious pro and con of this could be a pro that if you're chasing an ultra realistic overall sound presentation, then this amplifier with a really nice pair of ATC speakers, like a studio type of speaker, is going to give you a fantastic result for that type of sound. But not everybody wants that. Some people want it to be, music to be more romantic, lush, or any number of different styles of sound presentation. And then the half of a standout sonic strength is just the overall focus and clarity of all of the music. And it really doesn't matter if it's the bass. The bass is really well timed. If it's that clear vocal that I spoke about before, or if it's the treble detail from this amplifier is really exquisitely good, because it's just about right. You can hear the detail really clearly without it being overdone in any way, shape or form. That overall clarity and focus and organization and just overall resolution to the whole soundstage is extremely very impressive from this amplifier. It's, the only reason I say it's a half a standout point is because other amplifiers like, the NAD M23 are also exceptionally good in this regard. They organize the sound, they space that sound out, and they give you a great sense of overall clarity. So that's why, yes, the Ultima stands out in that regard, but there are other amplifiers that are also very good. However, listening to the M23 by comparison, I would say its sound delivery is a little bit more two-dimensional, not as three-dimensional. There's not as much special character and, authentic realism to the way sound, is delivered from that amplifier. So that is where the Ultima stands out. That's that extra bit of, the 1-2 that I mentioned before, plus the half. It's where this amplifier really stands out and starts to give you something unique, something that's different. Something that some audiophiles will really love and find massively gratifying. And a great musical example would be with Prince's Avalanche track from the One Night Alone album. The Ultima lets you hear very clearly how Prince is using his voice in a super nuanced way to create an emotion. And I'm not a singer, but if I were, then I think I would really pick up on this and greatly appreciate their serious skill. And I don't think other amplifiers present this aspect of this track nearly as clearly, or I've not picked it up before, but now, of course, I can't unhear it. But comparing to the much bigger, much more expensive Griffin amplifier shows some very interesting things here about the Ultima, because in a lot of ways, listening to the digital setup that I have here, the smaller, less powerful, half the cost Ultima driving the SVS Titan hangs with the bigger, more expensive Griffin, which is already a win given the Griffin's reputation. And beyond that, I think we start to get into sound characteristic differences between these amplifiers, both very, very capable, rather than one being necessarily better than the other, which is saying a lot about the Ultima really. And it's the sound characteristic differences that are so stark and distinct will be why one audiophile would say one amplifier is better than the other. But I really don't think it's that. I think it's just characteristic differences. As an example, the Ultima, I find, with the Titan speakers, emphasizes or brings out the vocal details more. So it seems to tip the balance, the sonic balance up just a little bit in favor of the vocals and the highs. So vocals sound really clear, really well defined, really well spaced. The treble detail, all the same. And the bass is there, it's solid, it's big, it's full, it's great. But it's just a slight favor of clarity, upper frequency clarity. Whereas the Griffin seems to go the other way. It seems to make the sound more about the musical whole rather than the individual specific parts. It seems to tip the balance slightly darker, so pushes the bass higher and pushes the vocals and the treble back. But because the vocals and trebles are pushed back a little bit, they're not as clear, they're not as well defined. So some audiophiles will think the Chord is the better amplifier because it sounds clearer in every single part because of the way it's spaced out. Others will prefer the warm, more bold, more, musical mass sound that the Griffin can deliver. So when you're looking at these types of differences, given the price difference, the Ultima, like I said, it's hanging with the bigger, more expensive integrated amplifier in this room, in this system, of course. And I have to say, I really do like the sharpness of the Ultima's treble because it's not overdone and it really is clear. And I really appreciate being able to hear the subtle details of the treble, whereas the Griffin's treble is definitely softer and less well defined. But again, this is just a preference thing and of course how these amplifiers are interacting with these speakers. Where you do notice a very big difference is in the bass. The Chord's bass is very tight, very pronounced, it's ultra articulate and really punchy and full at times. But the bigger, more powerful Griffin is able to get more of what I call the big ballsy room hitting bass out of the SVS Titans. So the Chord sounds leaner than the Griffin in a direct comparison, but I wouldn't say that it's a lean sounding amplifier, it's just the comparison that shows this. But the bass from the Chord is always extremely tight, always extremely tuneful with a very obvious start-stop to every single note. So for bass detail, the Chord really is fantastic. But for grandiose and scale and muscle and impact and the overall sense of weightiness, that's where the Griffin amplifier really excels. And where I noticed more of this difference was when listening to vinyl, because that is when I turn the system up a lot more. And I really like the extra muscle of the Griffin and how that helps to make vinyl more to my taste by sounding more full and more authoritative in the bass. But vinyl from the Chord was still a very enjoyable listen. But I think I preferred it using my digital setup, which is using a Chord DAC, and maybe that makes sense. And a quick mention of the soundstage. I have two products here that I am reviewing from Isotech that have blown my mind for their effect on soundstage. With them plus the Ultima, the soundstage is exceptional. Given that's one of the weaker points of the Titan speakers, you wouldn't think that about them at all. So hopefully by now you can see that the Ultima definitely ticks a lot of very important boxes. It doesn't tick all of them, nothing really does, but it ticks a hell of a lot of them. So yeah, it's been very impressive. So that makes for a very easy sum up here. There will be some audiophiles that really dig the Ultima for how the music's layers and subtle details are so easy to appreciate, and how it helps your soundstage space to really bloom, all while sounding tight and focused and very authentic with a good amount of ultra tight bass. In a package you really can't fault for how it's been put together, that's immensely satisfying to interact with. So the Ultima is definitely not going to be for every audiophile based on its looks and also its sound, because I think once you're spending this kind of money, once you're at this level of hi-fi, your expectations are naturally very high and you probably know the type of sound that you like. However, I always recommend you to try other things. You should listen to different amplifiers, because I think if you went into a dealer's and listened to the Ultima, you listen to a Luxman, you listen to a Musical Fidelity, a Name, maybe a Macintosh, or around this kind of price point, you'll hear different takes on how music is delivered. And I know the Ultima is going to hang with the best of those integrated amplifiers around its price, easily that. And it will also stand out for the 2.5 sonic ways that I've mentioned in this video, really stand out in those ways. And those could be the ways that make it win your heart. When you're listening and comparing and choosing between, let's face it, a hell of a lot of different great options, all at this kind of price point. So I hope you thought this review was great. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you've enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more review videos like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button down there.